not easy.
So oftentimes in the Bible, we land on this topic of becoming new, right? Being born again. We understand this this process that God makes us into something that we are not, right? But what does that actually mean for our life? I think that we miss that so often, that we can see it in some aspects, but in some others we don't. And I know in our lives, this is a vastly different thing. Like it looked very different, right? Yeah. And so I want to talk through this verse, talk about maybe John chapter 3 as well, and just kind of meditate on that phrase, on that understanding of becoming new again, being born again. What does that actually mean, right? So we're in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, and it says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come." So a very simple verse, right? And this is something that is quoted so often in our lives because we see that story of regeneration kind of over and over in people's lives where maybe they are addicted to something and they stop being addicted to it, right? Maybe they're struggling with this certain thing in their life and then they begin to overcome it, right? So for us, what does that actually look like? What is becoming a new creation to you look like?
Giving up your fleshly ways. Mm-hmm. Like for me, it actually looked like I stopped hanging out with some of my friends who were influencing me negatively. I was doing negative things with them. And like I went from not cussing, like from cussing like a sailor to not cussing and stuff like that. So like my life was night and day different. So right. I totally relate to this well.
Right. So in your life, you saw that huge change from like, I was one way and now I'm another, right? Like Mary Magdalene's line from The Chosen, right? Uh-huh. Like this is such a popular thing. This is how we see testimonies in a lot of times in the world, right? Yeah. And we see this like, I was this sinful, horrible person and then I came to Christ, right? And you had this major change in your early 20s where it was like, you went from this party lifestyle, you were part of the Red Cup gang, like, you know, like that was your life, right?
Red Cup group.
Oh, sorry, group. That sounds way better. Sorry. You were part of that, and then you kind of switched to now being who God wants you to be. Not instantly, but pretty drastically.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
How you go from doing this life to doing this life.
Yeah.
And you kind of cut off people, you cut off addictions, you cut off habits, you cut off lifestyle to become something completely new. Now, it doesn't look like that for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So for me, for example, like I have never touched a drug in my life. I've never gotten drunk in my life, right? I didn't have sex before marriage. Like all these different things for me was like, this is what God wants me to do from a very young age, right? And some of that was legalistic, but a lot of it was really what God wanted me to do, and I was trying to be obedient to that, right? Again, not that I didn't make mistakes, but this was my life, right? And I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't. Yes, I was a sinful person, but the sin didn't dictate my life. God did to a major majority of my life, right? Yeah. And so for me...
That's a beautiful thing.
Right, but that's what I'm saying here. It's like the new creation piece of this, I think, looks different for everybody.
We're still a new creation.
I'm not saying that I'm not, but that new creation piece happened when I was 5.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of when I was 22.
Right.
Instead of when I was 55. Right? And so for me, like, how much darkness did God save me from that I could have been in? Right. You know?
Yeah. That's why it's a beautiful thing.
Right. And I think it's amazing as well, but it just looks differently for me. And so
God's grace.
And so, but how do we work through that? You know?
What do you mean?
Because oftentimes people will neglect my testimony, right? Because they won't see it as a beautiful thing. They'll see it as sometimes in which you've seen it as when we got married was, oh no, you're just going to go crazy at some point. And then you'll have to come back to God. Sure. Right? You worry about that with me a lot. Why is that?
Because we're human, and you're not an angel. I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, I'm not an angel, and I sin. Yeah, I sin just as much as anybody else. Maybe not just as much as anybody else. I don't think that's a great way to say that, but I do sin, right? I do fall. I am broken, but like to preface this, like you've told me many, many times within our marriage, you're like, I'm worried that you'll stop believing in God, or I worry that you will want to go and do the party life.
Yeah.
Right. I have no desire to do that. Right.
Yeah.
Like zero desire. So for me, it's like, where's this coming from? You know? So explain that a little bit to me.
Because of my history, because of my background.
Yeah.
So like I'm relating your life to my life, which is probably very, very incorrect. It is very, very incorrect. But it's like, I went through all this, so surely you're going to have to go through all this.
Right.
You know? But I think of you and some of the youth kids that I'm like, don't go through this. Like, you do not have to do this life. You do not, like, and I want them not to go through the crap that I went through, you know?
But did you believe that before you'd experienced someone who hasn't gone through the crap?
Say that again.
So, for example, like before you met me or other people that you've met that haven't gone through that life, right? Did you believe that it was a possibility?
Yeah, when I became a Christian, I thought it was a possibility.
Really?
Yeah, so that's why I feel so strongly about mentoring and discipling.
Right.
Discipling specifically. It's not about mentoring. It's not about what I can do. It's about discipling people in the way of the Lord. Because I don't want them to go through what I've gone through.
Right.
But they still want to test it and figure it out by themselves. That's what happens with most teenagers, right?
But what are the consequences of that? So like, if you can become a new creation when you're 22 and you can still do all that fun stuff, I don't get it. Like, why not do that?
Oh, what do you mean?
Why not do that?
Why not do all the bad stuff and then go back and
yeah, if God's going to save you anyway, why not do that?
Because why would you want to live through that? It's
You're obviously doing well, right? Like, your life is good.
Oh my gosh, don't do this.
Your life is good. Like, you've got a great
by
job.
God's grace. Yet again, by God's grace.
Sure, but it doesn't negate all the other stuff, right? So what was the consequences of those things that you're saying are so bad if if you're good and God's grace is now? Why couldn't I just become a Christian later on in life?
Consequences.
How?
Because I'm seeing the consequences of the things that I did, of the sex outside of marriage, of the lust, of the drugs, and not necessarily like I want to do drugs again and I want to do alcohol again, but especially the sex before marriage, that's always really, really hard. Yeah. It's still like damaging within our relationship, I feel.
Yeah. Because there's always going to be a piece of you connected to someone else, right?
Exactly.
And the reason why I'm pushing on this, because this is the questions that your mentees ask you. This is the questions that youth ask you.
And I don't know how to answer it. If I'm being completely honest, I don't know.
Well, let's walk through it, right? Because God has saved me from a lot of darkness, right? And I see this because I have a direct parallel in my life, right? I have a family member who we're very close, and we did the same things growing up. We did the same things. We had the same people in our lives, same mentors, same friends, like everything, right? But now one of us has chosen to obey God and one of us has chosen to not, right? And so for me, I have a direct point that shows me this is what happens when you disobey. This is what it looks like. And slowly over time, these two, points on a graph have become distant memories, right? And so for me, like, you didn't grow up with that exact point like I did. And so for me, I think God saved me from a lot of that stuff. And when I had the opportunity to fall into the different things, right? Like my first girlfriend, like, she asked me to have sex multiple times, right? And that was like, no. And that's why we broke up, right? It's because, like, I was not going to cross that line, right? And so for me, like, it was this thing where it was like I chose God in that moment. And then I chose him again, and I chose him again, and I chose him again. And through that, he saved me all the pain of these different things. Yeah. Right? And so in my life, I feel like God has blessed me so much and done so much for me. Not because of who I am or because of what I've done, but because of the obedience that I've given him to control my life, right? To surrender in the things that he's asked me to, right? And so, yes, you're still here and your life is relatively good, right? And you're not seeing a lot of those consequences from when you went through all those different things, but that is often not the case, right? Oftentimes it's you get pregnant out of wedlock and you have this baby that you have to deal with for the rest of your life. Not that that is a horrible thing, because God's life is great, right? The way that he creates and all of that. But at the same time, it's like, was that God's original plan for you? Like, what did he actually want you to go through? What could have you accomplished if you did these different things, right?
Yeah.
And vice versa. If God did ask you to get married at 19 and have a kid, like, if you didn't do that, like, what does that look like in your life? You know? It's all about obedience for me. And so this living in a new life, being a new creation, that new creation is predicated on obedience. It is surrounded by obedience. And so if we don't obey, we're not acting as that new creation. We're acting in our sin nature, right? But if you are a follower of Christ, that new creation is who you become. Mm-hmm. Not that you're perfect, but that you learn to surrender to God no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And that's where obedience comes in, because it's not about how good you do the things God asks you to do. It's that you say yes to them, you know, and then let him take over from there.
So what stops a person from doing the bad things? You get what I'm saying? Because I don't know how to answer the questions you were asking me. That's why I said don't do that. Because, like, I don't know. I would be like, I don't know the answer to that. Let's dig into it together.
Do. Yeah. The answer to that is you love God more than yourself. Mm. Because if you do that, then you're going to see how good God is. If you obey him, you're going to see how much better his plan is than yours. And again, just like this podcast's name, doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, but it does mean that it will be better.
Yeah.
And you're going to see that in your life. There have been countless times, hundreds if not thousands of times in my life when I say, God, I do not deserve this. Why are you giving it to me?
Yeah.
Right? Have you had those moments in your life? Like, if not, maybe you haven't been obedient to what God has asked you to do. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not that these things are like promised to you. It's not like if you pray 5 times a day, then you're going to get $1,000. That's not how it works, but God will make your life better.
What if something happens in your life that is good, that you feel like God is giving to you, and you're still kind of not doing things 100% perfect? What about that?
When's the day that you've done something 100% perfect?
No, like you have been messing up and haven't been fully following.
Like you're living in sin.
Possibly, yeah.
Well, for me, I think like I struggled with that a lot when I was younger, right? Mm-hmm. Like we've talked previously about like
why good things happen to bad people.
Yeah, why good things happen to bad people, or why good things happen to sinful people. God will do what he wants to do, period, full stop.
Yeah.
Right? He will do what he wants to do. Mm-hmm. But in that, of course, he wants his children to inherit what he has.
Right.
Not only in heaven, which he definitely will, right? Store up your treasures in heaven, but also here on earth. He wants us to build his kingdom here. And if you love God, you'll want to build his kingdom as well. Because if you don't do that, if you're not obedient to him, what happens to all that time that you wasted? Do you get it back? Are you able to build the kingdom as much as God wanted you to in that original plan? No, of course not.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're wasting so much time that God wanted to use you, whether you're 7 years old or whether you're 70. God wants you in his plan. It's not just that he has a plan for you, but he wants to work with you, right?
Right.
He wants to make you a new creation, not just to save you, but because he wants to hang out with you, because he wants to do stuff with you, because he has a plan for you to improve the kingdom.
Yeah.
Do we think about it that way, right? Like we don't.
Right.
Oftentimes teenagers that are 16, 17, 18, they're like, oh, I just want to vape. Why can't I vape, right? Mm-hmm. Why can't I just go hang out with my friends and go to parties and blah, blah, blah? Because you're wasting time that God could be using you to save someone else's life.
Yeah.
Because you're wasting time not only punishing yourself, because that was my problem, right? That was my problem becoming a new creation, is like I thought if I didn't obey God, I would just hurt myself. When I got married, I realized that was not the case. Like my sin hurts everyone and everything around me.
Yes, absolutely.
So my pride, my selfishness, my lust, my anger, whatever it is.
Your choices aren't just affecting yourself. It's affecting those around you.
Right.
No matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not just my choices, but specifically my sin.
Yeah.
Right? My disobedience to God is not just a disobedience to God, but it's disobedience to the kingdom that he's trying to build.
Right.
And so because I wasn't obedient in these certain things, I lost the ability to do certain things. And I know that's amorphous or whatever, but like, we have to think about life that way. Because if you go 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 25, 35 without obeying what God has asked you to do, then that means you've gone 15, 16, 17, 25, 35, missing out on the opportunities that God wanted to give you in the first place.
Yeah.
Not just to make your life better, but to make the kingdom better. Mm-hmm. Because we missed out on your gifts. We missed out on your love and your mercy and your grace and your goodness and your kindness and your gentleness and your self-control. Like, we missed out on being that example for other people, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's like, in your life, what could God have done with the first 22 years of your life?
Yeah.
If you were a follower of Christ? Mm-hmm. What would that have looked like?
Right.
What would your family have looked like? How would you have impacted your mom and your dad and your brothers and your sisters? Right? And I'm not saying this like just to you, right? I'm saying this to all of us. Like, how much of an impact could we have? Right? That is the answer. It's God. Because it's not about us. It's about his kingdom and what he wants to build here. It's about who he wants us to be in that kingdom, right? And who he wants the others around us to be, how he wants them to be impacted. And again, I don't want you to feel bad. Like,
no, it's not like a guilt or shame. It's just, you're right. You know, like, if I could just learn how to voice that to the younger generation, like, don't do this stupid stuff, because I'm not just thinking about myself. I'm thinking about the people in youth that I worked with back in Florida. Like, yeah. Why are you choosing this wrong road?
Yeah.
You know, I know so many that are decided to go their own way, and it's like they're missing out on so much. And I try to help them get back on course, and it's just so hard because we're so stubborn, everybody, you know, and selfish, and we want to do this fun stuff, and like, but I have so much fun as a Christian, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so it's not just about me, that I don't feel like a guilt or anything, because God has delivered me and I'm thankful for where I am now, but just the youth that desires to do their own will. Yeah. It's heartbreaking.
But this is where this passage comes in too, for soothing that wound, right? The old has passed away.
Yeah.
Right? You are a new creation. So the new has come.
Yeah.
Like, that is who you are now.
Right.
So God says, while I had this plan, and it's true, if you had come to me sooner, if you had surrendered sooner, we would have done all these amazing things. That's true. However, now that you're here, let's get to work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's our heart, right? Mm-hmm. Like, in ministry, in our lives, like, that's our heart. Not just to save people for their sake, but to build the kingdom in a way that is honoring God to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's not about guilt or shame. We're new creations.
Yep. Yeah.
And I wish my mentors, or not even just my mentors, people that I tried to lead would get it, so that they don't waste their time, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can you look at this camera so I can get a thumbnail? I'm just kidding.
You're so annoying.
We're YouTubers, bro. I'm just kidding. You want to talk about with our Patreon family a little bit why that upsets you? Or is that too much?
It really isn't like a guilt and shame thing.
No, I'm not saying that it is.
I could have done lived a better life. I could have done extremely more. It really is more about the youth girls that chose to do stupid stuff, that chose to go the party life, that decided to do the things that I told them not to do.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
clearly, you're like, this is the consequence if you do this thing, and then they go do it anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because they see me now. You know, like they see me now and they're like, "Well, you got out of it, so I'm gonna do." They're doing exactly what I did when I was 17. Because at 17, I did have the opportunity to come to Christ, right? Like, and I was digging into it, and I was wanting Him. Like, He was pursuing me, and I said, "God, let me have fun first."
Yeah.
Like, I denied God just to have fun, and do stupid crap, and waste my life, and like. And I see a specific girl, like, doing the same things. And I don't know where she's at right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I see the ones that I saw that were more like you. And I see them also doing bad decisions because they let the world infiltrate. They let love and infatuation, really, and lust and all this get in the way of all the promises that He has. Like, if you would just stay the path, be strong, be courageous. Like, don't falter. Like, I think back of in what's the word? Josiah? No, Joshua.
Yeah.
In the book of Joshua, he says like a million times, be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous. Like, don't stray, you know? And I feel that way for, like, I'm thinking of two specific people, I guess, but it's hard.
But we're the outlier, right? Like, even in adult life, even in Christianity, like, we are the outlier, you know? Like, we're even watching a podcast the other day, and they're talking about, like, TV shows, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, I wouldn't watch any of those TV shows.
No.
Like, they're rating all these TV shows, right? It's like, okay, I would watch a few of them, but like many of these that they're talking about, like, rating their top 10 TV shows of all time. It's like, I've seen like a couple episodes of that, and it's like, I had to stop watching it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Same here. Like, one of my favorite shows, I had to stop watching because it was too bad, you know?
And that's our personal choice. And I get that other Christians are like they have certain lines that they go to or whatever, but it's like, for me, it's like going back to that Timothy verse, it's like being an example in what you do. Yeah. You know? And it's not that I don't watch things that other people might say the same thing about, right? Yeah. But God has brought me to the place where I'm at, you know? And it's like, I don't know.
Sure, but it's like compromising, you know? Like, it takes a little bit. That's all it took for David. You know, like, I always think back to David. Those baby steps, it matters. So compromising a little can lead to a big mistake.
If you want to check out this full episode, you can do that on patreon.com/thesnipelife. This is the best way to help us to support what we're doing here on the Better Not Easy channel. Thank you very much.
Just remember that following Jesus is better not easy.